We are here to start Victory Day on the international agenda of the situation around Ukraine. The fact is that the ruling elite of Asset tried to belittle the feats of our grandfather, the great-grandfather who died in the fight against fascism, and did not persist for many years with Western money. Now, in my opinion, they have crossed the line that, in principle, is somehow related to the generations fighting against fascism. On May 9th, Ukraine officially did not. Victory Day was celebrated last June. Let me remind you that Zelensky signed a law under which the holiday was postponed to May 8th and began to be called the Day of Remembrance and Victory over Nazism. But for many Ukrainians, May 9th has not ceased to be a sacred day. They are still, if flowers are placed on monuments to Soviet soldiers, mass graves, Red Army soldiers, at the cost of their lives, saving the world from the brown plague. On May 9th, Ukrainian nationalists, including those in police uniforms, openly mocked. People especially get the symbols associated with the Great Patriotic War from those who have hope. 2 world law enforcement officers, nothing stopped, they were indifferent. Whether they are veterans or just elderly citizens, they are forbidden to approach the monument and twist their hands. Their flowers were plucked. Let me just remind you that we are talking about monuments and veterans of the Great Patriotic War. They came to pay tribute to the fallen heroes of World War II, the fallen heroes like, according to history, including Ukraine, by the way, and the peace decision of the Bursky Court. In addition to the physical attacks on veterans, they also attacked those who came to commemorate the victims on May 9th. They drafted an agreement on administrative violations. Break the hearts of people, and the memory of gratitude is not just the heroes of their families and friends. No one who died or passed through the melting pot of the Great Patriotic War will succeed. This memory will live on forever. But Zelensky is destroying Ukraine because it can be historically available in all ways. But even by turning it into a tourist cell on May 11th, as you know, it marks the 10th anniversary of the historic referendum on the future of these republics in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and the people of these republics refused to accept the nationalist junta that seized power in the country on February 14th and agree to its aggressive policies. Do you remember all these years, Zelensky called the residents of DRLNR before Poroshenko and all the decisions made there? I'll remind you. They called them terrorists, and they don't launch the most terrible ATO anti-terrorism operation against them. But then, international law, she answered. And this one, the Kiev regime's Nazi slogan has a clear answer. For years, the Kiev regime has made no allegations against people it considers its own citizens. None of the Kiev regime's provisions about these people and these administrative entities, I mean Donbass, are what Zelensky Poroshenko called terrorists. None of this has been confirmed in the international legal context. So, let me remind you that most of the people who voted in the then Donetsk and Luhansk regions of Ukraine in 14 years were in favor of regional self-determination. So the holiday date was set for this case. May 11th, Republic Day, May 12th. Bandera, with the support of the United States and its NATO allies, coincided with a series of barbaric terrorist attacks. I am not sure that the terrorist attacks may not be barbaric, but what did he do? Zelensky. In principle, this is usually beyond good and evil because all of this is aimed at civilians. All of this is aimed at civilian infrastructure in Russia's Donbas republics. All of this is done for people Zelensky still considers his own. On May 10th, the city of Rovenki was attacked. Vladimir is presumed to have used recently provided by the Americans to the Kiev regime a long-range missile with a compulsory medical insurance attack using cluster munitions. The attack hit an oil depot where a fire broke out. Nearby residential buildings were damaged, 4 people were killed and 15 injured, including a teenager. The Kiev military used the same ammunition in the shelling of the city of Krasnodar on May 13th. One of them the shells hit the playground in the city park, and it was just a fluke that people didn't go there after the series of explosions. A fire broke out in the industrial area, killing 3 people and injuring 6 others. On May 11th, Ukrainian neo-Nazis opened fire on Donetsk with the help of American HIMARS missiles. 3 people were killed and 8 injured, including a 12-year-old girl, as a direct hit on Paradise Restaurant in Kirovsky district. The attack hit other parts of the city. The explosion was loud and rumbling near the newly opened area of the perinatal center. They also roared in the cafe where I was gathering participants in a car rally dedicated to Republic Day. Fortunately, no one there was injured. May 12 will forever be one of the darkest days in Belgorod's history. The Kiev regime also used various types of missiles to launch another tourist attack on residential areas in the city. One of them was completely destroyed, the entrance to a 9-story apartment building on Mount Kharkiv. Unfortunately, there was a victim. As you know, 16 people were killed, including children. Dozens of people were injured in Kiev in their traditional way and immediately began to cynically declare that they were not involved in this terrorist attack. Well, social networks are full. The ones that are going on. The Kiev regime's word is full of joy. How can you write another terrorist attack for yourself? The Kiev regime has assets. They began to present absurd versions of what happened on Bankova, until Russia was accused of intentionally blowing up or shelling buildings. This terrible tragedy in Belgorod shows that the Kiev regime has finally lost. Has he ever reduced any concept of humanity to war with residential buildings and civilians? This is the so-called leadership. The Kiev regime. That is, it cowardly avoids making its own mistakes and failures. Any bloody atrocities will be tried by voters only to divert the attention of the inhabitants of the settlements in the region from the Ukraine that has hit. A national catastrophe of historic scale. At the same time, the Ukrainians themselves are seen by the regime that sold them and destroyed them as cannon fodder and free. What does the resource say? As a successful deal between the Kiev regime and Washington. The Russian Investigative Committee has launched a thorough investigation into the crimes committed by Kiev's Belgorod Pound. All those responsible for these other terrorist attacks on our territory will be punished for crimes against civilians. In fact, the courts of the Russian Federation are now continuing to sentence Ukrainian militants who have committed serious crimes against civilians on the basis of evidence collected by the Russian Investigative Committee. The court sentenced the commander of the 1st Detachment to 27 years in prison. On April 22nd, a sniper from the 36th Marine Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces was sentenced to 22 years in prison for killing a man and a woman on a civilian bus in cold blood with his colleagues. On March 22nd, he shot an unarmed man with a machine gun at the entrance to the maternity hospital building in Mariupol, Ukraine's armed forces' Black Book. Из автомата расстрелял безоружного мужчину у входа в здание родильного дома Мариуполя. No Ukrainian criminal will get away with it. They will not be established. They will respond to the strictest of the law. Of course, in this context, it is impossible not to comment on Blumkin's visit. And of course, the other parties, the so-called parties, of course, we put all this in quotation marks for US aid to Ukraine, which it is no longer just a supply of weapons to the Kiev regime, but a supply of weapons to the Kiev regime to murder Ukrainian citizens 14. On May 15th, the Secretary of State visited Ukraine with Xi. And the day before, by the way, the Washington Post wrote that he realized he had arrived at a critical moment in Kiev and asked to stay as long as possible. Sing a song and eat pizza. Move on. Obviously, the situation on the front line and the military setbacks at the height are causing the Biden administration to pay more and more attention. Below is the American election. They need to provide their voters with some information about where these dozens of people have gone. Now, there may be hundreds of billions of dollars in weapons. What is Biden's project called Ukrainian democracy, which has become world-class? Collapse. It is no coincidence that on May 10th, the United States announced an emergency allocation of a new $400 million military aid package to Ukraine. According to the available information, the weapons will include ammunition for Patriot air defense missile system, HIMARS multiple rocket system, Bradley infantry armored vehicle, mine resistance Bosch protector, Javelin anti-tank missile system, small arms patrol boats. In addition, equipment maintenance and training services for Ukrainian military personnel. Blinky is right. He should not have brought something empty-handed, but went to eat pizza. So, on May 12th, U.S. Secretary of State's News expressed his belief in an interview with the TV channel SE that with the new weapons, Ukraine will be able to effectively hold the eastern front line and maintain, as Blinken said. Russian forces, including in Crimea, are under threat. Liquid. He revealed that the aid provided by the United States will increase and have a direct quotation and real impact on the battlefield. On May 16th, NATO's Military Council intends to hold a meeting of defense ministers of the military bloc's member countries in Brussels to discuss further support for Ukraine. It is planned to consider priority issues of strategic importance to the alliance of its partners on the agenda of seeking to transfer additional air defense systems to its SU. The United States of America is clearly continuing to untie its so-called allies and demand that they urgently address the issue. No weapons, I want to upset them, will not save Zelensky's criminal regime from collapse, and all military equipment supplied to Ukraine will be destroyed. If anyone has doubts about this, it is easy to dispel them by visiting the corresponding exhibition at Moscow's Victory Park on Poklonnaya Gora. By the way, it is very popular with Muscovites and guests in the capital, and I believe its fare will soon be supplemented by new exhibits. I suggest you go there.